Welcome to How to Assemble Stuart Model Boilers. This is part 1, assembling the 501 type of boiler. Generally speaking, the 500 and 501 series assemble in pretty much the same way. It's the 504 boiler that's different. Here are a pair of cast metal plates for a 501 boiler. Brand new, never touched. At the moment I have quite a good collection of Stuart boilers, so I thought I'd show you them. Entry level is the 500 boiler, and as you can see it has two long water tubes, but the centre tube is a superheater. Above those two are two 501 boilers, very similar, but they have more water tubes, and again the superheater pipe down the centre. The diameter of the barrel on a 500 and 501 boiler is the same, but the diameter of the barrel on a 504 boiler is far larger. The 504 boiler has a superheater tube down the middle, but it has more water tubes at each side. The Stuart boiler fittings for the 500 and 501 boilers are the same. And in fact the fittings for the 504 boiler look the same, except the threads are larger, where the fittings screw into the boiler. The assembly of a 500 and 501 boiler is identical, and strangely enough it's very different to the 504. I don't know why this is, but it's the way of things. Both the 500 and 501 use metal rods like these to hold the assembly together. In this clip I'm trying to find the rods that fit this boiler because some of them are shorter. And here is the 501 boiler I'm going to assemble. This one, believe it or not, is brand new. It's never been fired. And it's far from new. I'm amazed there aren't any dints and dings in this one like there are in some of the others. It needs a good clean and polish, and I'll do that in the fullness of time. What I'm doing at the moment though is just showing the principle of assembly. Once I've assembled this boiler I will leave it assembled, but then at some stage I'll probably dismantle it and paint it. During this video there are the usual warnings about how not to do it. And in fact there are many different ways to assemble these boilers. Rule number 1, do not drop the cast iron parts on the floor. That would not be a good thing to do. In this clip you can see the principle of assembly of a 500 and 501 boiler, or should I say 500 and 501 boiler casing. This next part is very important. These castings are not too bad, they're a bit rough in places, and the hole is too small for the boiler to fit in. Here's a shot of the side of one of the plates, and as you can see, it's a bit rough and needs finishing before the painting begins. The current problem though is the size of the hole in this plate. Not only does it have to be a size that will accommodate the boiler, there needs to be some clearance, because don't forget the boiler expands when it gets warm. Here you can clearly see what the problem is. The boiler will not even fit in the hole to start with, and even if it did it would be far too tight, and when the boiler gets hot and expands the cast iron plate is going to crush the actual boiler barrel. I've seen this effect many times on the 500 series of Stuart boilers. To enlarge this opening to allow the boiler to fit with some clearance, I was not having much success. I tried a flapper wheel, that was no good, and the drum sander just destroyed itself. There are many different ways to do this. The quickest was just to use a grinder like this. I could have bolted this plate to my milling table and used a fly cutter in the chuck, but that would have taken a long time, and then of course there is the risk of damaging the part. Don't forget I'm not an engineer. Using this really old grinding wheel that's very well worn in my drilling machine seemed to be my weapon of choice, and in no time at all the boiler was a perfect loose fit in the plate. This is how it needs to be. A rattle fit, literally a rattle fit with a gap all the way round. This should be okay because there's no possible way that the cast iron part can damage the copper barrel. Some of the holes in the cast iron plates were not drilled all the way through, so here I'm just making sure that they are. Most of them were okay, but one in particular didn't have the hole all of the way through, so I drilled out the cast iron, and this took a while. But eventually the drill broke through and all was well. Now I need to sort out these rods. I don't quite know what's going on here. There are quite a lot of rods with this collection of boilers, and most of them appear to be a little bit too short. Eventually I found 4 that were slightly longer, and these are the ones that I'm going to use to fasten the boiler together. I'm not fitting any heat insulation because the boiler is going to have to be dismantled again When I finally finish this boiler, it will be a really good example of a 501 boiler. Once I've fitted it all together and turned it upside down, you can see how it works. The centre pipe, as I've mentioned before, is the superheater, and the two outer pipes are just water tubes, to give a greater surface area for heat exchanging. The next thing to look at are the boiler fittings. The fittings were in a bag labelled 500 boiler, but they're exactly the same. This is the steam tap. I can't say that the thread is particularly tight, but some Loctite 542 will fix that. The other bush on the top of the boiler is of course for the safety valve, and here I'm fitting that. Once again, the threads are not exactly tight, but I'm sure it'll be fine. You get the idea what the boiler is going to look like. I will of course be cleaning it up and polishing it to almost a mirror finish with a bit of luck. These are the old style water gauge fittings for a Stuart boiler, and they're really good. I wish they still made them with the inspection plugs in the end to clear any lime scale, which does happen periodically. But that's the price of progress. Some things are just not as good as they used to be. And that is about it for part 1. I have a few more to assemble, but I won't bore you by repeating the assembly process on more than one type of boiler. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.